Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest, the new representative of the United Nations and the Arab League, Lakhdar Brahimi. Thank you for welcoming us here in your Parisian apartment. Everywhere on the planet where there's trouble, be it in Haiti, in Afghanistan, South Africa, Iraq, you've been there to broker solutions. This time, is it mission impossible?
Well, all assignments are difficult, and this one is no exception. And sometimes you hear people talk of a mission impossible. Of course, this particular assignment is especially difficult.
You thought long and hard before taking this assignment. You even talked with Kofi Annan. What are some of the questions you asked yourself, and what did you talk about when you spoke to Kofi Annan?
Well, of course, I did have qualms. It's a great honor, of course, that I should be called upon. It's also a great surprise to me. I'm no young lad any longer, so I was surprised to be called upon. And of course, I had to talk to a great number of people around me. I had to talk things over with my family to begin with Kofi, also with some of my fellow elders.
What did he tell you?
Well, Kofi said that he expected them to call on me. Well, I am, of course, quite conscious of the difficulties that lie ahead, but it was very difficult to say no. At the end of the day, when you're asked to help out in a situation as complex as this one, when there is so much suffering and injustice inflicted upon a people, well, even if you don't know that people, that particular people, it's difficult to say no. Now, I didn't really hesitate, but I did have to think long and hard about it.
A diplomat who's close to all of this told the Reuters news agency that you were hesitating because of the gridlock inside the Security Council.
Well, of course, the UN Security Council and its difficulties won't make matters much easier. And I harbor no illusions. I never expected that it would suffice to ask nicely for a consensus.
Have you spoken to the 5 nations that have veto power?
No, not just yet. I'll be in New York next week. And as I'm sure you know, France is currently chairing the UN Security Council. I am in touch with the French ambassador to the UN, and I will be holding talks, not just with the 5 permanent members, but with all members of the Security Council.
Now, on the ground, it's 300 military observers who are packing their bags. They're going to be replaced by a civilian mission that's 10 times smaller. What will be that mission?
Well, I don't know. I'm all for a light footprint, as it were. I don't believe in big missions, and I don't think one is necessary here. Now, in Damascus, well, let me put it this way. I think the function generates the organ and not the other way around. This is not about setting up a 50-man team and then finding something for them to do. First, we'll find out what needs to be done, and then we'll send in the right people. Now, I think in particular, from a political point of view, well, I would say that we need to bring about the possibility of a serious dialogue.
Serious dialogue between whom and whom?
Well, between all parties concerned. And who is that? Well, we're about to find out.
It's complicated what you're doing because it's a divided opposition. That's why you're not directly answering my question. The biggest problem, is it not the fact that those who were hoping for an end of Ramadan truce are in for letdown? Both sides seem to want to fight, not talk.
Yes, unfortunately. A civil war is always... well, I would say it's the most cruel form of conflict there is when when people start killing their neighbors or indeed their brothers. That is the worst form of conflict you can imagine. Now, a lot of people say we need to avoid civil war, but I think we already are in a civil war situation and have been for some time. And what we need to do now is put an end to that civil war. Now, this won't be anything easy to achieve. Now, another matter is the following. You know, in the early days of the Arab Spring, if you want to call it that, I had already said that this wind of change and of aspiration for change would blow over all Arab countries, although it would take a different form in each one of those countries. I also said back then that every government in the Arab world had here an opportunity to steer that change, failing which they would fall victim to it. And there you have it. Now, Syria is no exception. Change cannot be avoided in Syria, and I'm talking here about a serious change, not a cosmetic makeover. I'm talking about a fundamental change. I heard the certain ambassador mention the legitimate claims of the Syrian people. Well, those claims have to be satisfied.
Does Bashar al-Assad have to go?
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. Bear with me. Give me some time to take up my new responsibilities. I've already heard in the media people almost say that I'm in favor of Bashar al-Assad staying on. The time has not come to talk about that, in my opinion.
When the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, when he was visiting the camps, the refugee camps in Turkey last Friday, says that Bashar al-Assad does not seem to deserve a place on this planet. Does that make your job harder when he says things like that?
Well, France is a great country, of course, and I can only respect the point of view of France's Minister for Foreign Affairs.
When he says Assad does not seem to deserve a place on this planet?
Well, listen, I'm not going to start passing judgment on every person who expresses their opinion on the Syrian situation. No, I will, of course, talk with the representatives of the French government in New York and possibly, or even certainly in Paris also, and we will say to each other what we need to say to each other. In the meantime, I respect the opinions of all governments in the Arab world or throughout the region and elsewhere.
Your job is to go see all sides. But when, for instance, there's a report like the UN report on human rights abuses that said that there were abuses on both sides, but not of the same scale, do you have the ability to speak out?
Oh, well, that's easy to do. You know, the point here isn't to get personal gratification and to shout out that you're for this or that or the other. No, the goal here is to help the Syrian people. We must do everything we can to help the Syrian people. If putting your fist down at some point is helpful at all, then I'll have to do it. Let me talk about Kofi Annan. His departure is very clearly a political move in favor of the Syrian people, because Kofi Annan publicly stated that it was of the essence now that we stop just pointing fingers at each other and that we needed now to develop a common position to support the Syrian people, rather than to try to score points and wave fingers at each other. I think Kofi Annan's departure was very clearly a political move in favor of the Syrian people.
And after this act, will things change at the Security Council? This week you're going to New York.
Well, I certainly hope so. You'll be in New York next week. I will too. And again, I harbor no illusions. Change will not be brought about from one day to the next, but that will clearly be one of the goals that we need to work on at the UN level. And indeed, the UN are working to that end, even before I joined the group.
Lakhdar Brahimi, one final question for you. You were telling us that the first time you went to Damascus was in the 1950s. And you told us as well that the Arab Spring has been different in every single country. Syria, today, did you predict that this would happen, a civil war that was so deadly?
No, certainly not. You know, one of the defining traits of the Arab Spring was the surprise that it represented everywhere. With every new event in the early or in the later days of the Arab Spring, I think one common trait of all those events was the element of surprise. Nobody expected Ben Ali to step down so quickly, or Mr. Mubarak. Nobody expected all the events that occurred in Tunisia or in Egypt after that. And no one certainly expected what's happening in Syria now.
Syria, with the same patchwork of religions and communities as Lebanon, are we heading towards a situation like Lebanon, with a very fragmented society?
We'll see. You know, Syria stood in the past as an extraordinary example of coexistence, what the Arabs refer to as muwatana. This feeling of national belonging. Well, in that respect, Syria stood out as an example. You know, in 1958, I knew people in Syria, and I couldn't tell you for my life who was a Christian, a Muslim, a Shia, or an Alawi. For very long, that's what Syria was all about. And I certainly hope Syria will not lose that in the future.
And you who've worked in Iraq, do you have hope that it won't end up like Iraq?
I certainly do, but I cannot tell you.
Lakhdar Brahimi, many thanks. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. More to come on France 24.